What is up, you spooky bitches? We are back and we have another episode of the Hello Sidney podcast here, a podcast for horror lovers where we discuss any and all things horror. And it's me, your girl, Sidney. Happy Friday. Happy mid-October? That happened so fast. How did that happen? It's okay. I'm having a blast. It has to end eventually, but I am having the best October ever. I hope you guys are too. I'm going to Salem this weekend, which I'm super excited about. I go every year. Even though it's super, super busy, it's still worth it. The spooky Halloween vibes are just unmatched, so I can't wait for that. I'm going to see Rob Zombie tonight because I'm filming this on a Thursday, so by the time you guys are hearing this, I will hopefully already have met him. I'm so freaking excited. Oh, and I went to go see an early screening of Frankenstein last night, and I'm not conflicted. I think it was a very good and a very beautiful movie. It was just too long. It's a 2.5 hour movie. And in my opinion, they cut it into sections, into parts. And the part about Victor's history, I personally think is just a little dragged out. And there was times that it was losing me. However, the second half, they get into the creatures story. And that's what really hooked me. That's where it got me. So overall, I thought it was a very good movie. If they don't win an Oscar for, at the very least, costume design, but also set design too, I am burning the Academy to the ground. For legal purposes, that was a joke. Don't come for me, FBI, okay? Relax. But if you see the movie, you'll get it too. So we're all just gonna burn the Academy to the ground if they don't win, because how could you not? You guys will see. It's coming out on Netflix. I think it's having a limited theatrical release, which I did like seeing it on the big screen. However, I wouldn't have minded seeing it at home where I could have paused it, because 2.5 hours is a long time. I could pause it and go get a snack or go to the bathroom. 2.5 hours is a long time. And again, that's probably just because I'm a millennial and it's 2025 and my attention span is this big. But 2.5 hours is a very long time if it's a movie that's dragged out at parts. Anyway, enough about that. It's kind of ironic that I just saw that and now I'm talking about the movie May, because May is basically a modern day Frankenstein in a way. So it's kind of interesting that this lined up at this perfect time, but that's just the universe telling me that this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. So today we're talking about a movie, May, and this movie came out in 2002. It's a 2000s core movie. Does not get talked about nearly as much as some other 2000s core movies do. But May has a runtime of 1 hour and 33 minutes. It has a 6.6 on IMDb and a 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. And this movie was directed by Lucky McKee, who, if you listen to my Tales of Halloween episode on Wednesday, he did a segment there. And I usually like the stuff that he does. So I really like this movie and I like the woman a lot. But in Tales of Halloween, his segment is weirdly my least favorite for some reason. But he, like Mike Flanagan, is one of those who uses the same actors. So Angela Bettis is May in May, and she is also in The Woman. And Lucky McKee wrote this movie as well. And this was actually his directorial debut. So this is a directorial debut. It was kind of insane the way that this story plays out. And I've always been a huge fan of this movie. It kind of gives me Carrie vibes in the way that I just feel bad for this girl up to a certain point. I just kind of want to hold her and tell her everything's going to be okay. I just kind of feel bad for her. So without further ado, let's get into May. So May opens up with a scene that we're going to see at the ending. So it opens up with the end, but it's very brief. But basically, we see this girl, and of course, this is going to end up being May, and she is staring at herself in the mirror, and she has a hand to her eye like this, and she's bleeding, and she's screaming bloody murder, she's in pain, because her eye apparently is gouged out. So that makes sense. So we see this, and then we cut, and suddenly we see May as a little girl. So we explore her childhood a little bit, and we see that May had a lazy eye, and she asks her mom, what's wrong with my eye? And her mom tells her it's a lazy eye, but we're going to make you look perfect. And we cut to May going to school, and she has a fucking eye patch on. And this is always so crazy to me, because it's instead of just letting your daughter live with this natural lazy eye, which is just not even entirely noticeable, you're going to put a whole ass black giant eye patch on this little girl. What? How is that any better? And to make it worse, as she's about to go into school, her mother is telling her if you want to make any friends, you're going to have to wear it. Like, leave it on if you want to make friends. Like, bitch, what the fuck? Everybody's going to be like, why are you wearing this? And that's exactly what happens. After her mom leaves, we see this little boy come up to her and he's like, are you a pirate? And she says, no. And he walks away, and so do all the other kids. Like, they look at her like she's weird. Like, it would have been better off to just have her go to school with her fucking lazy eye showing, as if that's a big deal. So we cut to sometime later. May's a little bit older, and we see her parents singing her happy birthday. Still wearing the eye patch, by the way. Parents are singing her happy birthday, and her mom brings out this gift, and she goes to unwrap it. And you can tell her mom is just a raging bitch, because like she rips the paper, and her mom's like, ugh, now it's ruined. And like she finishes unwrapping the gift for her daughter. But when she opens it, it's a doll. And this doll is in a glass case, and this doll's name is going to be Susie. That's what her mom tells her. She's like, this is Susie. She was my first doll I ever made, and she was my best friend, and now she'll be yours. And May like goes to open the case to take out the doll like any child would, and her mother is like, oh no, you can never take her out of the case. Like, she's special. She's not to be played with. So it's like, what the fuck is the point of giving a kid a doll? Like, what do you, like, oh no, you can just look at her. And we see May doing exactly that. Like, she just looks at her and she talks to Susie. And then we cut to May as an adult, and we see she still has Susie. Susie's case is like a little bit more worn now. There's like a tiny crack in the corner. But we see that May is still talking to Susie. So like, May is still Susie's only friend, is pretty much the implication that we're getting. And she starts to talk to Susie about how I saw a boy today. And as she's saying this to Susie, we're getting a flashback from earlier in the day. And we see May walk by, and she watches this guy working on a car. And she says to Susie, she's like, you know how when you meet somebody, like you get to know them, and sometimes you see parts that you don't like. And May says, and sometimes you don't like any parts at all. But that boy today that I met is different. I like every part of him, especially his hands. And we get like a close up of his hands, like working on the car, and May staring at him. And May watches him like a creep. Like, she is like hiding behind a post and like watching him from afar. So he did not see her. But May says to Susie, don't be mad. You see me. And like, I appreciate that. You're my best friend. You see me, but I need a real friend. So again, we can clearly tell that like May is very lonely. May doesn't have any actual friends. And May's a little weird. May is a little bit odd. By a little bit, I mean a lottle bit. So May is at the eye doctor. We cut to her there, and they're talking about her contacts. Apparently, she has glasses that like pulls her lazy eye forward, and now she has contacts made that's gonna like pull her lazy eye forward. I don't know if that's an actual thing, but if that is, cool, whatever. Better than a fucking eye patch. Like, as a child, like, who does that? That poor girl. Anyway, so she's asking if her contacts are going to be ready by Friday because she has a date. And the doctor tells her yes. And she's like, good, because this boy is perfect. And it's like, she's talking about this guy already that she hasn't actually interacted with, like assuming that they're going to go on a date on Friday. And like, I mean, part of me is like, okay, that's on manifestation, girl. Like, fuck yeah, fucking create that shit. But again, the other part of me is like, okay, this is kind of like stalkerish behavior. And sure enough, she finds him again. And she watches him come out of this building, of like a mechanics building or something. And she sees him sit down and smoke a cigarette. And she is just like staring at this man in disbelief. Like, he is obviously like the hottest person she's ever seen. And I will say, he is very hot. Like, he's super hot. He's played by Jeremy Sisto, who was like everywhere in the 2000s. Like, he was in Clueless, he was in Wrong Turn. So he's super hot. I'll give it to her. So he still doesn't notice her. Like, she's the only one staring at him. And May ends up going into work, which she works at an animal hospital. Like, she's a assistant for a vet. And she sees this girl, Polly. And Polly is played by Anna Faris. And Polly mispronounces the word scalpel, and May corrects her. And then we hear the vet, who has like a very thick, like, Eastern European accent. It seems like he mispronounces scalpel the same way. So that's where she got it from. So May goes outside and she sees Polly carving a pumpkin. So if you're like, Sidney, how the fuck is this a Halloween movie? It's really not, but there are some elements of Halloween. And Polly asks her, what are you being for Halloween? And this is all going to culminate to a Halloween party, to Halloween night. Okay. So there is a Halloween element to it, but May looks like kind of uncomfortable. Like, she looks like she's just not used to conversing. And like, instead of answering Polly's question or saying anything relatable, she just looks at Polly and says, you have a really beautiful neck. Which, like, I'm trying to be accepting because I do feel bad for May. But at the same time, if I was just like trying to ask somebody a normal question and they came back and just said that, I'd be definitely off put by that. I'd be like, what the fuck do you want to like? But that's also my mind, because I'm like, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to wear my fucking skin? And like, this is one of those movies that makes me feel that way, because that's kind of how this is going to turn out. So that's why I'm a little paranoid if somebody were to come up to me and say that. But Polly just kind of accepts it. And she tells May, like, call me sometime. Like, we should hang out. And there's definitely like this flirty undertone to it. But eventually May goes home. She's on the elevator going up to her apartment. And there's this couple in the elevator just like aggressively making out, like an adult couple, like literally fucking relax. Like, somebody else is in here. They're aggressively making out, and May is just like kind of standing there awkwardly, and they both like turn and look at her like they're annoyed. Like, you can't wait 5 seconds until you're in your fucking apartment. Like, be so fucking for real right now. Relax and don't look at this poor girl annoyed, you bitches. So May continues on with her life. She gets her contacts, she puts them on, and she shows Susie. And eventually she sees that guy walking down the street, and she walks past him really closely. Like, she purposely waits to cross the street until he crosses the street, and she looks at him, and he just doesn't notice her. Again, he like completely walks past her, doesn't notice her. So eventually we cut back to the vet, and there's this guy that comes in the vet, and he's like, I went on vacation and I came back from vacation, and my dog has 3 legs, and I've looked everywhere, I can't find it. And he's just like panicking, and Polly and May are just like listening to him and just look at him, and they're like, what the fuck? So eventually May goes home, and she's trying on a bunch of different clothes. Of course, she's showing this all to Susie, and eventually she picks an outfit, and she follows that guy. Now she's like actually following him, and he goes into a cafe, and she goes into the cafe as well. And she sits at a table not far from him where he could look up and see her, but he still doesn't see her. And she just like watches him as he reads, and eventually she tries to like walk by him and get his attention, and like she's putting sugar in her coffee and kind of like leaning her ass out, like doing anything she can to get this man's attention, and she's still just getting nothing. And eventually she goes to sit back down, and she watches as he kind of dozes off, and then eventually like falls asleep. So he falls asleep with his head on the table and his hand kind of up like this. And May goes over and she starts touching his hand, because remember, she said like he has really, like, I especially love his hand. She's obsessed with his hands. So she goes over and she starts touching his hands, and she eventually like puts her face in his hand, like, so his hand is like cupping her face, and starts like caressing herself with his hand, and she's all happy, she's smiling. And then suddenly he wakes up and he's like, hello? And he looks up and sees her, and this causes her to like jump back, and she like falls down and she runs away, and he just looks confused as fuck. And this again, I struggle, because I go back and forth between like feeling bad for May, but also being like, girl, what the fuck are you doing? And like, obviously she never learned as a child like how to appropriately interact with people. So like, of course there's that element, but at the same time, like, girl, there's a fucking limit. Like, what are you doing? What is this? So we see May back at work, and she is like cutting her finger open with the scalpel, and she's bleeding. And Polly sees this and is like, what are you doing? Like, doesn't that hurt? And May is like, no, like, it's relaxing. It doesn't hurt. And she's like, look. And she pokes Polly with the scalpel, who Polly at first is like, oh my God, you crazy bitch. But then she kind of like calms down, and she changes up, and she's like, actually, I kind of like it. Do it again. Like, again, there's a very flirty undertone with Polly. And we see that guy who was like talking about the dog who lost its leg come back with the leg. He's like, I found this in a bush. Are you able to sew it back on? And May says, yes, I could. Which, like, May isn't the vet. Like, May isn't the one to be doing surgery. So it's interesting that she's saying this. And of course, this is kind of like foreshadowing and is going to lead us up to something else. So we see May in a laundromat at night, and sure enough, that guy comes in and he says hi to her, and she just doesn't respond. She just like stares forward, just smiling, which, like, again, May, come on, girl, like, say something. And they kind of just like stand there and stare at each other. And eventually she does offer him to use her detergent. So she finally speaks, and she's just like, again, super, super awkward. You could tell this girl has never really talked to anybody before, like maybe outside of work. And they introduce themselves, and of course she's May, and he introduces himself as Adam, and they shake hands. And when they do, she kind of like pauses and like looks at his hand, because again, she's obsessed. And he asks her if she wants to go outside and smoke with him. So we cut to them outside. She's smoking like her first cigarette ever, so he's helping her like light it and everything. And he asks May if she makes her own clothes, and she says that she does. So she sews, and she just looks at him and is like, I love your hands. I think they're beautiful. And it's like, okay, I don't even know you yet, but like, thank you. That's a kind compliment. And he like makes a joke about it. He's like, oh yeah, I used to be a hand model. Like, just kidding. And they kind of both laugh about it. I don't fucking know. So back in the laundromat, May drops like a pair of underwear as they're getting their stuff. And she's like all embarrassed. She picks it up awkwardly, but then she looks down at his basket. And this is after the two of them just look at each other for like a solid minute. Like, they literally just look at each other in silence for like a minute. And she looks down at his basket and is like, race cars. And he looks down and sees that his race car underwear are like right on top of the pile. And he's like, oh yeah, my girlfriend bought me these. And then he goes to walk away and she looks all sad. She's upset by this. And he turns back and he's like, let me correct myself. My ex-girlfriend bought me these. Which is it, Adam? Because I don't really fucking believe you. How do you fuck up and say my girlfriend bought me these? Which is it? But she smiles and he ends up giving her his carton of cigarettes and is like, practice. Okay, good. So now we're making her have a terrible habit. Excellent, Adam. But eventually he's just like, see you around, and he leaves. So May goes back. She's on fucking cloud nine. She's smiling. She's all happy, and she's practicing like what she's going to say to him, and she's like replaying the conversation out loud. And she goes back and she like tells Susie all about it, and she lays down and she kind of like caresses the cigarettes. Like, she kind of like pets them as she's falling asleep. So we see May dressed like she's going to work, and she is going to work. However, she is crossing the street, the same one that she had seen Adam on earlier, and she walks by him, and this time she purposely bumps into him. And he starts talking to her. He's like, oh, hi, May. How are you? And again, she just doesn't respond. She just stands there in the street and just like looks down smiling. It's like, okay, say something. I don't fucking know. We're in the middle of the street. You bumped into me. Say something. But eventually he just keeps talking and he's like, I was about to go have lunch. Like, do you want to come with me? And she does. And we cut to them in the park and he has a sandwich. He cuts in half, gives her a half, and he asks her what she does. And she tells him how she works at an animal hospital and people think it's gross. And he's like, I love gross. Like, gross me out. Tell me a story. So May decides to tell him this really heinous story. This is about a dog, so like fair warning. And she tells him the story about this man who came in with his dog who was dying, and they went to look at it, and it turned out the dog had a twisted bowel and needed an operation. So they shaved his stomach, they cut him open, and they took out a piece of intestine, and she's like explaining in detail how this looks. Like, it was the size of a hot dog, blah, blah, blah. And Adam's eating during this too. And she says everything went fine, and we sewed him back up, but we were out of the heavy sutures. So the vet decided that we would just triple up on cat sutures and that should be fine. But a few days later, the old man called hysterical because the sutures burst while he was at work, and he came home to the dog sprawled out with its guts everywhere. And she like smiles about this, like as if she's remembering it. She smiles and she's like, I had to sew that one back up. And we pan to him and Adam just looks at her absolutely horrified, which, like, dude, don't tell somebody you like gross if you're not willing to handle gross. Like, I mean, yes, she's a little socially awkward and weird, but you asked for it. You literally said, I love gross. And she tells you the grossest story ever. And I can relate to this as somebody who used to work in prison. And like, sometimes I would tell people that I worked in prison and they would be like, oh my God, what's like the grossest thing you've ever seen? Or like the most fucked up thing you've ever seen. And I would say something and they would be like, oh my God, and like be so horrified. It's like, don't fucking ask for it if you don't want it. Anyway, they move on, and May notices that there are these little kids in the park, like playing with the teacher, but they seem like they're blind. They can't see, and you can kind of tell because she asks Adam, like, what's wrong with them? And he says they're blind kids from the daycare down the street. So Adam gets up and he's like, I gotta go. They're playing in Argento at the theater, so I gotta go see it. I'm seeing Trauma. And May is like, what? And he's like, you've never seen Trauma? So of course, Dario Argento's Trauma. And as he's getting up to leave, May asks him not to go and like touches his hand. And he's like, what? And she says nothing. And she's like, I got to go back to work anyway. And he's like, well, maybe I can see you again sometime. And she's all excited about this, of course. And she asks him, well, how about tonight? And he agrees and he smiles and they like shake hands again. And she's like obsessed with his hands, like still looking at it. And he asks like, do you want to take it with you? Like about his hand, because he understands that she's obsessed with it. So eventually May goes home and she sews herself a new dress for this date they have tonight. And she dances around in it in front of Susie. And there's like these other two, she has a bunch of dolls. Like, it's not just Susie. She has a bunch of dolls. And she takes these two dolls, a male and a female. And you can tell she's pretending that it's herself and Adam. And she's like making them kiss and everything. Like, May is just very immature for her age because she's never had a friend other than her doll. And she's definitely never had a relationship or anything with any type of guy. So she makes the dolls kiss, and then she looks at Susie and she says, "Thanks for the advice, Susie," and she leaves. So we cut to May, and she and Adam are at the auto body that he works at, and they're like sitting in a car, and he asks her what she was doing the other day at the coffee shop, like with the whole hand thing. And she's like, "I was so embarrassed." And then she's just like, "I've never had a boyfriend before." And you can tell he gets kind of uncomfortable because he's like, "Boyfriend? Like, fuck. Like, I literally just met you. This is our first time, like, actually going out." And he looks confused, but she asks him, like, "Do you like me?" And he says, "Sure. Like, sure, I like you." And May is like, "You don't think I'm weird?" And he's like, "Oh, no, I do. I absolutely think you're weird, but I like weird a lot." And she's like all excited about this. And she takes his arm and puts it around her and like caresses his hand and tells him that he's perfect, which he's like, "Nobody's perfect." And she's like, "No, you're perfect." And he asks her if she wants to see his room. So of course she agrees to this, and we see them go back to her place, and he's got like horror stuff everywhere, and he's got like Dario Argento posters, like fake knives everywhere, and he's like, "Does this freak you out?" And she says no. She's like, "Nothing freaks me out." And we've understood that at this point, May. We get it. And she sees this knife, and he grabs it, and he's like, "Oh," and he like presses it to her, and it's like a retractable knife, and she gets a fucking kick out of this. And if anything, like, gets a little fucking weird about it, because she takes it and she like slowly holds it, and she like slowly pushes it into her own chest, and it looks like she's like getting satisfaction from this. And then she turns it, and she like turns it to his chest, and they get closer, and eventually they kiss. And you can tell like she does not know what to do. Like, she doesn't know what to do with her hands. Like, she does not know what the fuck to do. And eventually she like grabs him so aggressively that he like falls backwards and like falls into his dresser. And he's like, "Oh shit." So he like stands up, and he's like, "Who taught you how to kiss?" Like, which is like, poor girl. I mean, I guess you would assume somebody of her at her age, she's got to be in her 20s, like would know how to fucking normally kiss somebody and not like fucking attack them. So he's like, "Who taught you how to kiss?" And she just says, "Susie." Ugh, girl, May, like, you make it kind of hard to feel bad for you, because what the fuck? Like, what do you mean? So May goes home, and she's pissed, and she goes right up to Susie's case, and she repeats what he said, "Who taught you how to kiss?" And she hits Susie's case, which causes the glass to crack a little bit. And now this is interesting, because the glass cracking is literally symbolic of May's stability. Okay. Like, when we first started, like when she was a kid, the glass was perfect. And then when we cut to her as an adult, we see the glass has like a tiny, tiny crack in the corner. And now we have like a full crack down the middle. And this is going to continue until it's fully broken. So we see May at work the next day, and she's like wrapping up her hand, because when she hit the thing, like the glass cracked and it must have cut her because she's bleeding. So she's wrapping up her hand, and Polly shows up in the doorway, and she's holding a cat, and she's like super flirty again towards May. And she asks May, "Do you want to watch me file?" So she starts filing, and she turns on music, and she asks May to dance, and she like gets up on the table and starts crawling towards May seductively. And May like takes one of the cigarettes that she has, because she still has that pack that Adam gave her. And Polly just looks at May and is like, "Do you like pussy?" And May is like, "What?" And she's like, "Cats. Like, do you like cats?" Like, she switches up. And May gets up and like dances with her awkwardly. And Polly asks her, like, "My cat Loopy, my landlady, is a real bitch, and she's making me get rid of her. Like, do you want to have Loopy?" And May agrees to keep her cat, and Polly like briefly kisses her on the lips, just like pecks her on the lips, and is like, "Thanks." So Polly leaves, and she tells May like, "Oh, I'm having a girls' night," and she kind of invites May, but then kind of just like walks out before May can answer. And it's just like, again, super flirty with her as she's leaving. So we cut to May back in her apartment, and she's sitting by the phone, and eventually she picks it up and she dials, and it turns out she's calling Adam, but she gets his voicemail, and she leaves him a message, and she's just like, again, super fucking awkward. And she's like, "I was wondering if you would want to be together again." And then she like pauses and corrects herself. She's like, "If you would like to get together again sometime. I had a great time last night." Like, she sounds like robotic almost, like she doesn't know what to do or what to say. And she leaves her number, and we see like we're focusing on Susie in her case as we see May behind her like making this phone call. And May ends this like a fucking business email. She's like, "I look forward to seeing you again." And she just hangs up. It's like, girl, come on. So we see May go to the laundromat eventually. She's looking around. Of course, we know she's looking for Adam, but he's not there. So eventually she goes home. She checks her voicemail. She has nothing. There's no messages. So we get like a flashback of Adam's hand caressing her face. Like obviously she's thinking about this. And then we cut to May standing in front of a door. And she's dressed up. She's wearing this cute little dress. And she doesn't knock on the door. She's just standing there at the doorway. And eventually Adam comes out. And he quite literally runs into her. And he's like, oh, fuck. Like he like gets startled. He's like, how long have you been standing here? And she says, since about 2. And he looks at his watch and he's like, you haven't actually been standing here for 2 hours, have you? And she's like, what do you think? I think you have been standing here for 2 hours, you fucking psycho. Like, again, I do feel bad for May in certain elements. And like towards the end, I feel bad for her too. But like, girl, that's so fucking weird. Like I would never speak to this girl again. Like, this is stalker behavior. Like, I would probably never speak to this girl again. So he says to her, like, oh, I'm sorry I haven't called you back. Like, I've been really busy with this movie. And she's like, what do you mean movie? And he's like, I made a movie in college before I dropped out and I just finished putting it all together. And May wants to see it. She asks to see it. She's like, I'll make you macaroni and cheese. And he's like, okay, sounds like a date. So eventually they go back to May's house and they're eating dinner. And she made mac and cheese and they have wine glasses. And in the wine glasses is Gatorade, which is hilarious. So they like kind of eat in silence. Like again, she doesn't know how to hold a conversation. They kind of eat in silence. And eventually Adam shows her his movie. And this movie is called Jack and Jill. And you can very clearly tell it was a student film. Like it's not like high quality or anything. But basically the movie is this couple kissing in the woods. Like they're having a picnic and they're kissing. And then suddenly the girl like goes to suck the guy's finger, but she straight clean bites it off. And there's blood spurting everywhere as she eats it. Like she chews on it. And eventually the guy like starts eating her too. So he like bites her arm and they start eating each other. And eventually it gets like more and more sexual because now they're like kissing. They're on top of each other. They're eating each other's flesh. So it's a weird like sex zombie thing, I guess you could say. And May is watching it and she's smiling. Like she's loving it. And Adam is kind of like looking at her instead of watching the movie. Like he's trying to see her reaction. And eventually she kind of like inches closer to him and like puts his arm around her and touches his hand again. And eventually the movie ends and Adam is like, well, what did you think? And May says, it was sweet. And he's like, sweet? Because even he thinks that is like a weird reaction. Because like, how is that sweet? But she says, the only thing that I have to say is I don't think she could have gotten his whole finger in one bite. That part was a bit far-fetched. And they kind of smile about that because it's like, wow, that's really your takeaway from this like weird thing. And sure enough, we cut to them kissing in May's bedroom. So they're kissing, they're laying on her bed. May keeps like grabbing at his hand because again, she's obsessed with his hands. And again, you could just tell she doesn't really know what to do. But she's doing a bit better this time. But he tells her to breathe. Like even he can tell like she's nervous. She doesn't know what to do. And he's like, just breathe. Like it's okay. So eventually he takes off his shirt and he starts to unbutton her dress. But as he's doing this, they're still kissing and she bites his lips so hard that he starts bleeding. And he like jumps back and he's like, what the fuck? Like I'm bleeding. And she looks angry at something. And she's like looking past him and he turns and he sees that it's Susie. And he's just like, what the fuck is that? And she doesn't answer. She's just looking angrily at Susie. And Adam is like, I'm bleeding. Like I need a towel or something. And May is like, oh, I know. And she like touches his blood and like rubs it all over her face. And he's like, May, like I need a towel. Like I don't want to do this. And she kind of ignores him. And she again, like tries to keep going. Like she tries to keep kissing him. And eventually he gets up and he's like, I'm going to go. And May is confused and he's like, I'll see you around. And he leaves because you can tell he's like really freaked out by this whole thing. And she tries to get him to stay. She's like, but it's just like your movie. And he's like, this is weird. And she's like, yeah, but you like weird. And he's like, not that weird. Which again, like, don't say you like weird if you're not going to actually like weird. Like, what's your definition of weird? Probably some basic shit. I mean, God, I don't fucking know. So Adam leaves and as we like focus on him and he gets out the door and he closes the door to the apartment and he can hear glass shattering and May screaming. And May screams, I told you to face the goddamn wall. So she's obviously again talking to Susie and the glass is cracking more, which means May is getting more unstable. But Adam leaves and we see May the next day or sometime later at work, and she's like working on a surgery with the vet. And eventually she goes to Adam's door again. Like, he's not answering her call, so she decides that she's going to go to his door again. And she can hear them inside because Adam has the front door cracked open a little bit to smoke outside. So he like has his arm outside with the cigarette as he's like talking to his roommate. And basically he's talking badly about May. Like, he's like, oh yeah, she's pretty, but like, I've successfully escaped that lunatic. Like, she's fucking insane. And they say May's name, and suddenly there's a girl's voice, and the girl says, who's May? And the roommate says, some weird chick that Adam just dumped. And May sees this girl like kind of reach out to Adam's hand and like grab his cigarette. So she's devastated. She's like holding her face. She starts crying. So eventually May goes home, and that boy doll that she had used as like Adam earlier, the one that she had kissing the girl doll, she cuts off one of its arms, and she uses its little arm to like kind of caress her face. So like, again, like pretending this is Adam. So as she's doing this, she gets a call from Polly, who starts to leave a voicemail saying like, come over when you get this. So we see May actually end up going to Polly's, and she's super sad, and Polly asks her what's wrong, and May doesn't say anything, and Polly kind of like caresses May's face, and like she's sitting on the couch and May is sitting like on the floor below her, and she kind of like pulls her head back and kisses her. And Polly is like, I've wanted to kiss you since I first saw you. And she starts to kiss her more, and then she starts to unbutton May's shirt, and she can tell that May's upset, and like she asks her about it again, and May is just like, I'm angry at someone. But Polly continues to unbutton her shirt and asks her like, do you feel weird me doing this? And May says, I am weird. And Polly says, I love weird, which like, yeah, somebody else just said that, and then he couldn't fucking take the weird. And May looks at Polly and is like, are you serious about me? And Polly says, yes. So May actually gets into it now. So they start kissing, and May is like touching her neck, because again, remember, she said you have such a beautiful neck. And they continue doing this, and eventually we cut. And sometime later, we see May in the park, and she's watching those blind kids again. And she specifically notices this one little girl that she kind of seems to focus on. And we end up cutting to the daycare that they go to. So it's Kids World School, and May goes in and says that she wants to volunteer. So we cut to sometime later, and we're in the classroom, and the kids are like singing and doing whatever activities. And one of the teachers comes up and introduces herself to May and is like, let me introduce you to the kids. And May says, can I meet that one first? And she points to that little girl that she had been focusing on in the park. And the teacher is like, oh, that's Petey. She likes to be left alone. And May says, nobody likes to be alone, which of course we understand, like May is saying this from experience, which like, this is the kind of stuff I feel bad for May about, because like she's basically been alone her whole life, because like her mother set her up for failure. Like, I will fully blame her mother in this. Like, her mother set her up for failure. In the original cut of this movie, there actually was going to be a lot more about May's childhood. So I think we would have learned about like just how shitty her mother was, but they ended up cutting it out because they felt like it was taking too long to get to the point. But I would have liked to see that. So the teacher brings May up to Petey and is like, hey, somebody wants to meet you. And Petey tells the teacher to go away. Like, she's like not having it. So the teacher goes away and she's like, yeah, good luck. So May sits with Petey, and Petey is like molding something. She has clay and she's like molding something, what looks like a bowl. And she asks Petey what she's making, and she tells her it's an ashtray. And May asks Petey like, oh, do you smoke? Girl, she's like fucking 10. Of course she doesn't smoke. And Petey asks May, do you smoke? And May says, yes, I do. Because now she has a fucking habit because of Adam. And Petey is like, okay, then you can have it when I'm done. So we cut to May at home, and she has the ashtray, and it has her, actually she's not at home. She's at the laundromat, but she has the ashtray with her, and it has her name carved into it. So as she's in the laundromat, just like minding her own business, who walks in but Adam? And he sees her, obviously, and he like walks right past her and doesn't say anything. Like, he's trying to completely ignore her. And eventually, like, she doesn't say anything. And he asks her, like, how you doing, May? And she's like, oh, I'm great. And he's like, lovely. And he clearly looks very uncomfortable. Like, he doesn't want to be around her, which, like, why walk into the fucking laundromat, you dumbass? And May ends up asking him, like, how are you doing? And he's like struggling with the machine that he's at. And he's like, ugh, this machine's broken. I guess I got to go to the other laundromat down the street. And as he's leaving, May is like, call me sometime. And he's like, sure, see you around. And he runs out. And of course, May goes over to that laundry machine that he was just on and tries to start it. And it works perfectly. So that was just like a piss poor excuse to fucking leave. Like, this pisses me off, Adam, though, because You come in here, you could have just ignored her and said nothing. You ask her, like, how are you? She answers and then asks, how are you? Like a normal person. And you're like, oh, I gotta go. Like, stop being a fucking bitch ass, okay? Like, you little fucking pansy ass bitch. So May's obviously super upset by this, and eventually she goes to Polly's, and Polly opens the door and she's wearing lingerie. And as she's starting to talk to Polly, she can hear another woman's voice from behind Polly, like from another room. And May looks behind Polly, and sure enough, in a doorway, she sees this woman's legs. Like, she must be like sitting on a couch and like putting her legs up for some reason. I don't really fucking know why, but May can just see her legs in this doorway, and she's staring at them, and they're bare. So she's obviously like either wearing nothing or wearing very little. And May sees this woman and hears this woman, and Polly is like, oh, sorry, it's just an opportunity I couldn't pass up. Like, do you want to join us? And May looks super fucking uncomfortable. And Polly is like, can we just do something tomorrow, May? Like, I gotta hit this, like talking about this woman. And May again is very upset. And Polly like realizes it, and she smiles and she's like, you're jealous. And she laughs and she's like, I can kick her out if you really want me to. Like, you know, you're my main mama. And May just gets upset and she runs away at this point. She leaves. And eventually she goes home and she's crying, and she's surrounded by all these dolls and doll parts. Like, there's some dolls that are intact, and there's some that are just like legs and fucking heads and like doll parts all around her. And she can hear the glass cracking. And of course, this is Susie. And at this point, the glass is not actually cracking. This is like symbolic of May's cracking sanity. So we see May on the floor again, still crying, and she eventually starts smoking, and she has this ashtray right next to her, the one that Petey had made for her. And she calls over to the cat, because she still has this cat, Loopy. And she calls over to the cat. She's like, I've had a really bad day. Like, come here, come here. And like, she's trying to get the cat to come to her. And the cat just hisses at her and like runs away. So this like really pisses May off, which like this is the part that I feel bad for her too, because again, she has nobody to go to. She saw Adam. She got upset. She tried to go to her one other person, Polly, who is now with another woman, and now she's home and she's just trying to get some attention from this cat because she's so upset. And like, obviously I don't condone violence, especially against animals, but this was like her last straw. And May gets so upset that she gets up and she throws the ashtray at the cat. And like, I don't think May intentionally meant to kill the cat, but the cat dies. Like, the ashtray hits the cat in the right spot, and we see that the cat is dead. So eventually we see May in the bathroom, and she's like standing in her bathtub, and she has her phone, and she can hear the glass cracking, and now it's like very loud to the point where she yells at Susie to shut up because she can hear the glass of her case cracking. And she picks up the phone and she calls Adam. And as she's waiting for him to pick up, we pan down and we see that the dead cat is at her feet in the tub. So Adam picks up and he's like, who is this? And she says, May. And he doesn't answer, and she's like, what are you doing tonight? And Adam doesn't answer immediately, but eventually he's just like, why? And she's like, maybe we could get together. And he's like, I have plans. And now we still hear the glass cracking in the background as this is happening, and May yells, quiet. And Adam's like, who are you talking to? Like, again, she just obviously knows that she's super fucking weird. So she's just like, she plays it off and she's like, no one. And she's like, well, what about tomorrow night? And he says, maybe, which like, you have no intention of fucking hanging out with this girl again. So like, just tell her that. And May says like, what time? I'll wait. And he's like, no, like, don't do that. And he's like, I gotta go, May. Like, I just gotta go. And May is like, okay, I'll talk to you tomorrow. And he just like doesn't really say anything to that. And he just says bye and he hangs up. And we again continue to hear the glass cracking. And it gets so loud at this point that it causes May to cover her ears. But again, this is symbolic that May, her sanity is fucking cracking until it's eventually going to shatter. And everything in her life is like causing her sanity to crack even more. So that's why we're now hearing this sound. And eventually May goes over to the closet where she has Susie in, and she looks at Susie and she's like, I hate you. And now we cut to the next day or sometime later, and May goes to volunteer with the kids again, but this time she brings Susie in and she asks Petey to come over. She's like, come over and see if you can figure out what this is. Because again, the kids are all blind. And Petey comes over and she's like touching the glass case and she's like, I don't know what this is. And May says, this is my best friend. And as she's telling them this, she's like kind of like petting the top of the case. And May goes on and says, I didn't even realize it until just last night that she's my best friend. And Petey is like, it's just a box and there's got to be like, your friend's got to be inside, like take it out. And May gets all upset and she's like, I can't, like, I can't take it out. And the kids all start surrounding her and they're all just like, yeah, let it out, take it out. And May is like, I can't, she's special, she's very fragile. And like the kids are literally starting to surround her like a group of fucking wild animals. And they start pulling at the case. And Petey specifically like grabs the case and starts pulling at it. And May grabs the other side and is trying to pull it back. And eventually the case falls and shatters completely. And again, like this is where sanity has fucking shattered completely. Like this is very symbolic of May's mental state. So the case shatters completely and now there's broken glass everywhere. And these kids, again, who are blind are like, she's out, like talking about the friend in the case. So they get down on the ground and they're just like in the broken glass on their hands and knees and they're screaming and there's blood everywhere. And May is also crawling through this broken glass trying to get to Susie. And eventually we see her grab Susie from the case and the kids are all like crying and pawing at her and like trying to get to Susie. And eventually they like literally rip the doll apart. So she's in pieces. And we cut to May on the elevator in her apartment. And the couple that had been kissing earlier goes to get on the elevator and they see May covered in blood holding this broken doll. Like she's holding pieces of this doll. And now this part, people speculate that this was like a hallucination and that this never actually happened because it is a little weird. Like why would these kids be like trying so hard to get to this doll or like crawling through glass willingly? So I don't think that the full thing was a hallucination. But I think that maybe in May's mind, it was a little bit exaggerated and that's what we saw. But May gets into her apartment and she puts Susie down in pieces and she just cries. And all of a sudden she starts like very aggressively like rubbing and like almost like clawing at her own eyes. And sometime later we see her laying down on the couch with Susie. And again, she's just in pieces and the pieces are like on her. Like she has like the pieces like on her face and the dead cat is on her as well. And her phone rings and she gets a voicemail and this time it's from Polly and she's like, hey, like I'm wondering if you're okay. Like you've missed work 2 days in a row now. Like I'm wondering where you are. So May gets up and she goes to look in the mirror and her eyes are like all bloodshot and like all fucked up. And she still has blood all over her from earlier too. And she like gets up and she goes over to the dead cat and she sprays it with something like Lysol or something. So we cut to May. She's out again. She leaves her apartment and she's sitting at like a bus stop bench. And suddenly this guy comes over and sits next to her. And this guy never gets a name. I'm just going to call him the punk because he's like all in leather and he's got like this big mohawk and he's got all these piercings and everything. He's supposed to just be like a punk. So he sits next to her and he's like, are you okay? And she's like, so many pretty parts, no pretty holes. And she's saying this as she's looking at people walking by on the street. And he's like, okay. And he asks her name and she's like, it doesn't matter. And he asks her if she wants to do something with him. And she's like, what's the point? So like, she's obviously like not interested at all. But he's like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm just trying to be friendly. So she looks at him and then we cut to both of them in May's apartment. So she accepts. She actually hangs out with this guy. And he ends up, of course, being a fucking weirdo because they're eating candy. And suddenly he's just like, it's so hot in here. Like, do you mind if I take my shirt off? And mind you, he's wearing a shirt with holes in it, a tank top, like one of those mesh shirts with holes in it. Like, bro, you are not fucking hot in that. But she's like, okay. So he takes his shirt off and he leans back and May looks at his arms and she compliments his tattoo because he has a tattoo of Frankenstein on his upper arm, which again, this is going to be relevant because that's kind of what this story is. And this weirdo gets up and he's like, oh, I'm still burning up. Like, do you have any ice cubes I can rub on my nipples? Like, bro, who fucking says that and who does that, you weirdo? But he goes to the kitchen and he's about to go into the freezer and May tries to stop him. But ultimately he opens the freezer and he sees the dead cat wrapped up in there. And he's like, what the fuck is that? And May just says, my friend. And the dude is like, this is some sick shit. And May just looks at him and is like, are we best friends now that you've seen what's in my freezer? And he just looks at her and he's like, no, you fucking freak. Which like, he's weird, but like, I don't blame him for seeing that and being like, you fucking, like, what are you fucking doing, you weirdo? And he says that. He's like, no, you fucking freak. I'm not going to be your friend. And May cries. She gets really upset. And it's at this point that she snaps. Because again, remember, case is shattered. Sanity completely shattered. Mental stability shattered. And May grabs a pair of scissors and she looks at this guy and she just screams and she goes to stab him. And he like holds his hand up to try to defend himself. But she stabs the scissors through his hand and through his head. And she kills him and he dies. So now we kind of get a flash of all these body parts that May has complimented throughout the movie. So like Adam's hands, Polly's neck, that girl that Polly's seeing, her legs that she's been seeing. So we're kind of understanding what's about to happen here. And we see May kind of turns into a completely different person at this point. It's like this is what's let her finally like let go, like let her guard down. And she's smoking a cigarette and she's looking down at the punk's body and she's got blood all over her hands and she just says, I need more parts. So we cut to May sitting in the park eventually, and Adam comes up to her and she's just like so nonchalant. Like he comes up to her and he's like, hi, May. And she's just like, what's up? Like she doesn't even care about him anymore at this point. And he asks her what she's reading because she's reading a book. And he's like, what are you reading about? And she says, amputation. And he's like, for work? And she says, no, for fun. Like, I love her. I love her for being weird like this. And like now she's not trying to get this fucking man's approval anymore, which I love that. And he apologizes to her that things didn't work out. He's like, it just doesn't feel right. And she's like, no, I understand now. Like she's like fully. And this is the part where, again, like he should be scared of her. It's like she went from like one thing to a completely different thing. And it's because she's lost it at this point. She has snapped. And he's like, friends. And he holds out his hand to shake. And he shakes her hand. And she looks down at his hand. And she like goes to kiss it. And at this point, you can tell he's like regretting saying anything at all. He's like, okay, like I really have to go now. And he goes to leave. And May just goes, later, hands. Like she looks at his hands and like waves goodbye to them. And Adam just like looks at her and is like, what the fuck? And he leaves. So we cut to May at work and she's with Polly and she like has a tape measure and she's like measuring Polly's neck. And Polly is kind of like going on, like rambling on, talking, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, what are you doing eventually? And May is like, oh, I'm going to make you a blouse. And Polly asks about the cat and like, how's the cat? And May does not tell her that the cat's dead. But eventually, we hear a woman calling for Polly, and we see that woman's legs first, and it's the same woman that was in Polly's apartment. And she comes over, and Polly introduces her to May and is like, this is Ambrosia. So May doesn't even say hi or anything. She just compliments Ambrosia's legs. She's like, you have beautiful legs. And May continues on measuring Polly. Like she doesn't give a fuck about this woman being here. And she looks at Polly because she had noticed earlier Polly has a mole on her finger. And she's like, have you ever thought about getting that removed? And Polly is like, no, my grandma always said like imperfections make us beautiful. And May just kind of like side eyes her and like write something down. And Polly is like, well, what do you think? Like looking for validation. And May just walks away. Like May has fucking had enough. Like my girl is over it. And eventually she turns back and she like watches Polly and Ambrosia flirt with each other and they're like all over each other. And as they're distracted doing this, May goes into like the surgery area and takes a bunch of surgical tools and put them in her bag. And we also see that after work she goes and she buys a cooler. And now we cut to later. It's nighttime or it's another night. And May calls Polly and she says, happy Halloween. So again, remember, it all culminates on Halloween night. She's like, happy Halloween. I was thinking of coming by later to show you my costume and give you your blouse. And as she's saying this, we're seeing May sew together this costume. And she's like thinking of all these body parts again. We're getting flashes of all these body parts. And May finishes her costume. And it turns out she's dressing up as Susie. She looks identical to Susie the fucking doll. And we get a voiceover of May saying, if you can't find a friend, make one. And we're going to find out that she's taking that quite literally. She's about to go make herself a friend. And she leaves her apartment with this cooler. And her first stop is Polly's. And she gets there and she's inside with Polly. They're sitting together on the couch. And Polly suspects nothing, and May just asks her if she's expecting somebody, and Polly doesn't answer that, but she's like, did you forget my blouse? And May says no. So Polly like gets ready for May to give her her blouse, and she starts to tell her like, just so you know, like me and Ambrosia aren't serious at all. Like it's just a piece of ass. And May, now their positions are reversed from earlier. So now May is sitting on the couch and Polly is sitting on the floor, like kind of in front of May. And May takes these two scalpels and brings them around Polly's neck. And Polly starts laughing. She's like, oh, I'm so scared. Like she thinks this is just a game. She's like, oh, please don't hurt me. And then she's like, I trust you, May. And May starts like caressing her neck. And Polly just says, I know you would never hurt me, May. And without saying a word or skipping a beat, May slowly slits her fucking throat with both scalpels on both sides. And Polly is just like so in shock and she just dies silently. I actually really love this scene because again, this shows us like how much May has fucking cracked. Like, May has absolutely lost it. And like the way she just like, I know you won't hurt me, May. And like dead silence. I love that there's like no music in this scene. It is dead silent. She just slowly slits her throat. And Polly like is in shock and like goes to touch her throat before eventually just dying silently. And now May smiles, and eventually sometime later we see Ambrosia come in. She's dressed up in a Halloween costume. Again, her legs are exposed, her long, beautiful legs. And May goes to go into the kitchen. That's where she entered. And we see Polly's dead body on the floor, which Ambrosia can't see from the kitchen. So she doesn't know that anything's wrong. And May goes into the kitchen, and Ambrosia is like, why are you here? And she starts just being like super rude to May. Like, she does not like her. And May says again to her, you have really beautiful legs. And she tries to tell Ambrosia, like, give me a spin. And Ambrosia is like, you are so fucking weird. Like, I don't know what Polly sees in you. And May just says, Polly doesn't see anything. Now turn around, spin. And Ambrosia, like, is like, okay, whatever. So she like spins around and she gives May a fucking attitude. And May, just out of nowhere, while she's least expecting it, pulls out these two scalpels and just like boom, right in each side of her head. Just fucking stabs her twice in each side of her head. And Ambrosia dies. And the funniest part about Ambrosia dying is that she's holding a milk carton and she drops it, and the milk mixes with her blood, which makes Ambrosia. So May now has two bodies, and well, actually three, because of the punk. So she's got three bodies, and she just needs one more because she really needs those hands. And May is walking down the street with her cooler, and we see somebody stop her, like say to her as she's walking by, like, oh, you got any cold ones in there? And May just goes, yes, I do. Because she does have cold ones in there in some way. So, of course, we understand that the last person she's going to go for is Adam. And sure enough, she shows up on his doorstep and she knocks on his door. And her arms are covered in blood. Like, she is like elbow deep in blood. And eventually he answers the door. He's dressed in a toga. Very original Adam. And he opens the door and sees her there. And he's like, what are you doing here? And she doesn't answer. And he like waves his hand in front of her face. He's like, hello, like, what are you doing here? And she looks at his hands as he's waving them in front of her face. And she's like, I need them, Adam. And suddenly this girl comes out from behind him and she's like, Adam's taken for the evening. And she's like trying to be a bitch about it. But then May compliments her earrings, which causes the girl to kind of like, you can tell, feel bad for being rude to May. And she compliments May's costume. But May like takes a notice in this girl's ears and her earrings. And we know that there's a reason for that. She's not just being nice. So Adam asks her again, like, what are you doing here? And she doesn't answer. And this girl now again deciding to be a bitch again and like, I don't know, fuck with this girl is like, she invites May in for a drink. And May comes in and the girl laughs and Adam is like, thanks, like what the fuck. So they're sitting in there and Adam looks at May and is like, you should have called. And May is like, would you have answered? And Adam's like, yeah, if I was home, which like, that's a fucking lie. And May is like, it doesn't matter, I didn't come here to see you. And the girl makes her a drink as this is going on. And May is staring at Adam's hands and he asks her if something happened. He's like, are you, like, did something happen? Are you okay? And May just looks at him and is like, touch my face, which like, I'm sorry, what? And the other girl laughs and she like sits on Adam's lap and she takes his hand and touches her own face with them. Like she's kind of trying to rub it in May's face right now. Like, oh, he's mine. And she even says like, these hands are mine now. And May is angry. She's like, stop that, like get off of him. And eventually Adam is kind of like overwhelmed by this whole thing that he kind of like moves and this causes the girl to fall off of his lap. And he's pissed. She's pissed about it because he doesn't do anything about it. Like he doesn't say sorry. He doesn't try to get her up. But now May stands up and she goes over to that girl to help her up. Like she like holds her hand out and the girl stands up and May looks at Adam and she's like, so you're not going to touch my face? And Adam is like, fine. Like he's pissed at this point. And he's like, fine. And he goes over to her and he takes his finger and he goes to fucking tap her forehead because like, what the fuck else do you want me to do? But as he's going to do that, she grabs his hand and she takes her scalpel and she fucking stabs it right into that girl's throat who is standing next to her. And Adam sees this. This girl's blood starts spraying everywhere and he starts screaming and we cut. So we don't see exactly what happened to Adam, but we do see May lugging this bloody cooler back into her apartment and she opens it up and she smiles as she starts pulling out these body parts that she has wrapped up and she just says, you're gonna look perfect. And the first thing she pulls out is those hands and she takes the cat out of the freezer and we have this eerie music playing and we do get a brief flashback where we see Adam collapsing and May going to cut his hands off with a butcher knife. And like, I don't know. I'm assuming she killed Adam. Like, we didn't see how she killed him. We just saw him collapse and her go to cut his hands off. But whatever, Adam's fucking dead. So now we get this montage of May cleaning these body parts, and she puts on this dress that she had made and she had worn earlier. She puts on her glasses and she goes to work, and eventually she sews this body together, and she also sews clothes onto it. Like where the head is, she sews like like a mask almost onto it so you can't see the face, and same thing with the torso. So I don't know whose head it is. We never find out whose head it is. I don't know whose she might have used. I mean, she had plenty of options. She continues sewing this thing together, and on its face, on where its eyes are supposed to be, she puts Susie's eyes, because Susie is now shattered and broken. So she takes Susie's eyes, puts it on, and she takes that ashtray that was also broken, but the letters are still intact somehow, like it's shattered, but the letters are still intact. So she has MAY, and she rearranges them to spell out Amy, and she puts that on this creature. So her friend is called Amy, and she puts that carton of cigarettes in the pocket of the shirt, and she's done, and she's happy. She's so happy. She's smiling, and she looks at it and she's like, wow, words can't describe. So this thing consists of the punk's arms, and I think his torso as well, I'm assuming, Ambrosia's legs, Polly's neck, Adam's hands, and that girl that she killed that was with Adam, her ears. So we don't know whose head it is, or if there's even actually a head in there. I'm assuming there is, but who knows? And May like looks at this thing and she's like petting it. She's so proud of her work, and she's like, I don't even have to talk. I just have to feel, and you'll feel it too. And she like lays down on this thing's chest, but then suddenly she like has this moment of realization, and she starts to panic, and she sits up and she looks at its face, and she's like, you can't see me. And she takes her glasses off and like tries to put it on the thing's face, the thing's head. And she's like crying again at this point. She's like, you can't see me. Like, you can't see. Like, she's crying about this. She keeps repeating the same thing. And eventually she goes over to the mirror and she looks at herself and she cries for a while. And she slowly goes over eventually to grab this pair of scissors, and she builds up the courage and she stabs herself in the eye and gouges her own eyes out, or at least one of her eyes. And it happens to be the lazy eye. And May screams, she drops the scissors, and this is the shot that we get in the opening of her holding her eye like this with all the blood everywhere and her screaming. And now we understand it's because she gouged her own fucking eye out. And she like goes over to this creature, to her creation, and she takes her fucking eyeball and she puts it in this thing's face, and she has a mutilated face as well. Like her eye is all fucked up. And after she puts this eyeball in the thing and she's screaming, she looks at it and she's like, all I want is for you to see me. And she lays down with this and she just sobs, and eventually she gets quieter and quieter, and we get an overhead shot, and the eyeball that she just put in like kind of rolls off the thing's head, but we see its arm slowly come up and its hand come to May's face and start caressing her. And she just smiles and lays there silently as the thing caresses her face, and we cut to black and the movie ends. Okay, that was a fucking lot. I mean, obviously the thing didn't actually come to life and caress May's face. Like, this is just a part of her hallucination, and again, her like lack of sanity at this point, which is why I think like that, what she had seen earlier with the kids like crawling all over the glass, I think that probably did happen, and maybe that is how Susie's case got broken finally, but I think she was over exaggerating it in her mind. Like, she was experiencing an exaggerated version of it, just like this. Like, I absolutely do think that she sewed all these body pieces together, but I think she is like exaggerating it, and that this is a real person now, because I think she always looked at Susie as a real person too. Like, I think in her head, like, Susie talked to her, Susie responded to her, and that's why she would be like, thanks for the advice, Susie, or like, oh, you taught me how to kiss, like, what the hell, you told me to do this kind of thing. So I think she's always just like personified her friends, because otherwise she's completely alone, and that's way more fucking depressing, I think. So yeah, man, that's May. Again, in ways I feel bad for May, because she's obviously just like a sad, lonely girl who like didn't have the best upbringing or like parental support, it seems, from the brief things that we saw. But I mean, at the same time, like, I feel like if you get to a certain age, you got to kind of learn to get it together and like adjust to society, and you learn how to fucking socialize in some way, shape, or form. I mean, you got this job somehow, girl, so like you're able to like work and carry a conversation, I'm assuming. But that was May, and she really was just taking her mother's advice. If you can't find a friend, make one. And now she has made the ultimate friend. And it's even got a part of her with it, with her eyeball. And I think it's so interesting how the eye that she gouged out was her lazy eye that she was like so ashamed of. And now it's like that's the eye that your friend is going to see you with. And I don't know. It's kind of poetic that it comes full circle like that. But yeah, that was May. A weird little 2000s movie, but I like it. I love it. Honestly, I love May. I think it's so fun. Not necessarily a Halloween movie, but there is a Halloween party and it all culminates on Halloween night. So we can consider it a Halloween movie for these purposes. So that was May. On Wednesday, we're talking about another movie that, again, culminates in a Halloween party, otherwise is not a Halloween movie. And then after that, we're all Halloween movies from that point on. So if you guys haven't yet given me a 5-star rating on Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening to me, it would be super helpful. Helps push me out into the algorithm and find people to join our lovely little growing community we have here. So until next episode, you guys know where to find me. It's horror_chronicles on TikTok and Instagram. I post every day so you can keep up with me there. And until next time, watch more horror movies and stay spooky, my friends.